Hey and welcome to Neverwinter with Aragon. So I've been recently working on perfecting how we can actually rank these AoE DPS companions. Which one should you be using to maximize the amount of damage you can do against multiple targets? And a section that could be very useful to you guys is how much damage can it do within a very short time period, let's say 6 seconds at the beginning of combat. So the way I go and do this is I literally go to the dummy and I start attacking it. I record exactly how much damage that the companion can deal within that short window on this combat tracker. So again, how this would work is I'd go out of combat, resummon the companion, clear the encounter, then go target the dummy, and we can see there in the combat tracker that is hitting, and as soon as the duration gets over that 6 seconds, I can go and hit this end encounter. You can see the encounter did actually last 9 seconds, so what I'm going to have to do is look at the time at which I initiated the encounter, so that was at 1 second past 3 minutes past 12, and we can look at the air genasi, we can look at its powers, we look at its flail strike there, and anything that's within 6 seconds, so we have that 2 seconds past 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, so anything within that window counts as its damage dealt. You can see these 4 hits do. Anything that is considered as just single target, so that is its Tempest Blade and its Storm Pillar can only hit 1 target, I labeled those as non-AoE powers, and thus I don't count it towards the damage the companion can deal in an AoE environment because it can only affect 1 target with those powers. So I've gone and tested out a whole bunch more of those companions, pretty much all of them right here that I have already tested, these 25. Now there are multiple ones there that cannot actually hit more than 1 target with a power that's going to scale up. What this means is, if we take Suna for example, no matter how many targets she has, she's still limited with her bloodbath. She's not going to have, for example, a power like this Githyanki that it can go and target the dummy and can go and hit it with a sword strike that can hit anybody who's around him. Same with the spinning strike, it can hit anybody around him. Whereas Suna, she's limited because she does her bloodbath. Even if there are multiple targets, she's still only going to hit for a limited amount of times, which is a total of just 9 times. And then she'll have those bleed hits also on the targets. Of course, that will add up to a little bit more damage the more targets she puts the bleed on. However, we have seen a massive reduction in her encounter DPS there, so things really aren't looking good for her. So after collecting all of this data, what did we end up with? We can see a good few of the companions are just removed here. Their damage is counted as 0 in AoE, but keep in mind this is within 6 seconds. The Cold Iron Warrior, the Black Eye Spark Spectre do have powers, spinning attacks, which can hit multiple targets. However, they don't do them within the 6 seconds, and thus their damage is counted as 0. Same with Makos, same with Minsk. They take too long when you start combat to actually do anything. You can see with Minsk, he will just, for the first 8 seconds, cast this power and does nothing. So within 6 seconds, he's not doing anything. And that's a common occurrence with all of these powers that are labeled as 0. Suna and the Owl theoretically can do a decent chunk of damage, but they're labeled as 0 because they don't scale up with more targets. Let's say the Razorwood hitting 2 targets. This, instead of being 20,000 damage, would be 40,000 damage. Same with all of these guys. If the Succumbus or the Ingumbus can hit just 5 targets, that's over 1,000,000 damage right there. Keep that in mind with all of these damage numbers, and that's why I've removed the Owl and Suna, because no matter how many targets you have, they're only going to do this much damage, no higher. They don't scale up. So if you have a fight with 10 targets, Razorwood theoretically could hit all of them, dealing over 200,000 damage, meaning he would beat the Owl right there, and he's the lowest companion on my chart. So we end up with a chart that looks like this, with the Succubus and the Incubus clearly dominating with over 200,000 damage, and this again is hitting one target. Keep in mind again that these damage values are when the companion actually crits with its power and the enemies don't actually dodge the hit. So this would be the theoretical maximum amount of damage that the companion can deal, at least with my statistics. If you have higher stats than me, you can see them right here with my buffs, then your companion will theoretically deal more damage. Keep in mind again, this is within 6 seconds the amount of damage the companion could deal. Regis is in second place. Following that, we have the Mystagogue and the Wayward Wizard. They're pretty much identical. Keep in mind the Mystagogue can be a little bit better just because that big area power that he casts, he'll do it adjacent to the enemies rather than running away first. You have your Air Archon, which is still a pretty solid companion because it does that spinning strike at the beginning. Splinters, it has that very good dot and sweep attack. Intellect Devourer can be very good for its stun capabilities. And we can see it can do pretty decent amount of damage at the very beginning of the fight. It has, similar to the Succubus or the Incubus, the massive cone attack. You can see that right here. And otherwise there are the Fiora companions. Now when I've gone and tested the Fioras out against each other in terms of damage per second, you can see that the Mystic Fiora is a bit better. And that is because it can cast its big hit power more often, but within 6 seconds they're both just casting it once, and therefore you end up with similar damage values. The Githyanki is down there, and that's mainly because he doesn't have the chance to get much of his spinning strike off before 6 seconds is over. He is very close though. His spinning strike occurs just about 5 seconds into combat, so he can get like one hit off, and that was it then. 6 seconds was up. But if you leave him spinning for to 8 seconds or 9 seconds, he'll have that completed and he'll have done a massive chunk of damage to all of the enemies. Keep in mind again though that the Githyanki has a knockback ability on its spinning, so if your enemies can be knocked back, then he might reduce his own damage due to that fact of knocking the enemies away and then only targeting that one enemy that he's going to follow. There are of course a few companions I haven't tested, and if you think any of them does a massive amount of damage within the first few seconds of combat, let me guys know and I'll go ahead and test them out and we can compare them against the ones that I have right here. And this is the main reason why the Succubus and the Incubus, along with Regis or the Mystagogue and the Wayward Wizard, are so good because of that massive damage they can deal within massive areas within the first few seconds of combat. Within 6 seconds, the Succubus and the Incubus is dealing over 200,000 damage on that initial hit. Again, all of these damage values are only counting the powers that can hit multiple targets. The Succubus and the Incubus does have a bunch of powers which can go and hit just one target, like the Draining Kiss and the Necrotic Claw, and I haven't counted that in. So as soon as she does her attack there, that's within maybe 3 seconds of me entering combat, that is when she does that massive hit. So we could even lower the time amount and she would still do that much amount of damage. And there we have it. This is my chart then, where you can see the damage within 6 seconds compared against the amount of DPS they could deal against 5 targets. That's damage per second on average. So over a long period of time, you can rank them again on how much damage they can deal. And we can obviously see the Githyanki, if he isn't knocking back the targets, can deal the most DPS there, the consistent amount of damage. You can see the test damage there. And that was with the amount of different targets within Dread Ring, within Combat Advantage. One last thing to note is this damage values here within 6 seconds is not with Combat Advantage. I made sure to not have Combat Advantage because that can be pretty unrealistic to have Combat Advantage against all of the targets. So again, this makes the Succubus and the Incubus even better because it doesn't need that combat advantage and it can still do massive amounts of damage on its hit. So with that said, hopefully this has been somewhat insightful to you guys and somewhat helpful as what companion you should choose within AoE. Again, here is the chart of all the top ones that I have tested. More damage they can deal within a short period of time, the better. So again, I'd like to give a massive thank you to all of my channel members for helping me keep my channel going. And if I presented this well, consider leaving the video a like. If you're new around here, consider subscribing. We'll see you guys around. Goodbye for now.